I'm going to try to read from James Denny's book on the Gospel according to John. In examining the Synoptic Gospels, we had occasion to remark on the distinction which has to be drawn in them between the testimony of the evangelist to Jesus and the testimony of Jesus to himself. The writers of the Gospels wouldn't have drawn such a distinction, but we need to draw it. And in their case, it is not too difficult to apply it. But this difficulty is very much increased to an almost impossibility when we come to the fourth gospel. There's only one style in the gospel from beginning to end, and everyone speaks in it. John the Baptist, Jesus, and the evangelist himself. There's only one mode of thought represented in it from beginning to end, and everyone shares it. John the Baptist, Jesus, and the evangelist himself. What it enables us to see with indisputable clearness is the place which Jesus holds in the faith and the life of the writer. What we cannot so easily recover from it is the exact relation of this place to that which Jesus himself claimed. Now, to a large extent, the writer gives a testimony to Jesus given through Jesus' life. It is represented as the very word of the Lord himself. But a critical study of the gospel, and especially the comparison of it with the synoptics, makes it doubtful how far we can take this literally. And it is the preponderating opinion of all who have investigated the subject that the fourth gospel is in substance the fulfillment of the words of Jesus, which we read in chapter 16:12. And this is critical to understanding the gospel. I have many things to say unto you, but you cannot bear them now. But when he is come, the Spirit of truth, he shall lead you into all the truth. He shall glorify me, for he shall take of mine and shall declare it unto you. Now, the Jesus who speaks in its pages, though it is in the form of a gospel and follows the course of Jesus' life on earth, is not only the Jesus who taught in the synagogues and fields of Galilee, or in the temple courts and the streets of Jerusalem, but also, and this is critical, the exalted Lord, whose Spirit vivifies and interprets the memories of Jesus in the heart of an intimate, devoted, and experienced disciple. The words of Jesus are connected, of course, with times and places, for they are given as part of a historical career. But they do not belong to time or space. And here is another critical point. They are the expression of the eternal truth which was revealed in Jesus and which, for the writer, is identical with him. They are the word rather than the words of the Lord. They are the authentic revelation of what he is and was, as his Spirit has interpreted him to the evangelist, rather than the ipsissima verba of Jesus of Nazareth. But while this makes it more difficult to use the fourth gospel without reflection in answering the second of the two questions with which we are concerned, it gives us ample material to answer the first. The way in which Jesus presents himself in the gospel can generally be taken as embodying the evangelist's own sense of his place and significance for faith. Now, although this procedure is open to criticism, we begin with a prologue. The immense influence which these few verses have had in determining the doctrine of the Church, and the tendency of the once dominant critical school to interpret them in a purely philosophical and speculative interest, should not blind us to their essentially practical, historical, and even experimental character. The main propositions they contain are those of verses 14 and 16. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth, and of his fullness we all have received, and grace upon grace. Now this is entirely in keeping with what we found in John's epistle. And in spite of efforts to assign them to different hands, it seems to me everything is in favor of the view that the epistle is a sort of covering letter, accompanying and recommending the gospel. The gospel exhibits Jesus in his life in the flesh in precisely that significance for faith which he has in the epistle. There is the same insistence on the flesh, on historical reality to which immediate testimony is born. There is the same emphasis on the conception of Christ as only begotten, one who gives others the right to become children of God, but has an incomparable sonship of his own. There is the same sense of owing everything to him. There is not in the prologue a single word which betrays a purely speculative interest, such as we have in Philo. Jesus has been to John, the interpreter of God. In knowing him, he has known God as he has never did before. In seeing him, he has seen the Father. In associating with him, he has been flooded, as it were, wave upon wave, with the fullness of grace and truth which dwelt in him. This is the fundamental in the prologue as it stands, and is the key to everything else it contains. Possibly we understand it best by comparing it with the other Gospels. To all the evangelists, Jesus is a great person, and it lies in them somehow to explain his greatness. Mark does least. He connects Jesus with John the Baptist, and by a single allusion to the prophecies of Isaiah and Malachi, which were fulfilled in the forerunner, leaves us to infer that Jesus, God's ancient purposes, are being achieved. Now Matthew goes further. He introduces Jesus as the Christ, Son of God, Son of David rather, Son of Abraham. He is the key to the whole Jewish history, the one true religion, beginning with the Father of the faithful, which has its consummation in him. Now Luke goes further still. He traces the genealogy of Jesus not to Abraham, but to Adam. He is sensible that Jesus' significance is not national but universal, and that to appreciate his greatness we must understand his essential relation not only to Israel, but to the whole human race. But for John, none of these ways of representing the greatness and significance of Jesus is adequate. To exhibit the truth about Jesus, or rather to exhibit him in the truth of his being, we must relate him not to the Baptist merely, or Abraham, or the father of mankind, but to the eternal being of God. Now this is what the writer does by means of the Logos. And it is for this purpose that he makes use of the idea. He does not assign to Jesus any of the functions assigned to the Logos in the Stoics or Philo. In such things he has less than no interest. His heart is where his treasure is, with Jesus, and in coming in contact with Jesus, he has come into contact with the eternal truth and love of God. The final and sufficient revelation of him whom no man has seen has been made in the only begotten. There is nothing in the universe, nothing in nature, in history, in all that has ever been known as religion or revelation that can be truly understood except in the light of these verses 1 to 12. The world, as it has been put before, is a Christian world, and we do not understand it finally till everything in it has been set into relation to Christ. To set everything into relation to Christ under this profound sense of his universal significance is the purpose of the writer in the opening verses of his gospel. He does so in bold outlines, in a few brief sentences, and he borrows the conception of the Logos for a moment because, in the environment for which he wrote, it facilitated the execution of his purpose. But though he borrows the conception, he does not borrow from it. He does not invest Jesus with the unreal greatness which belongs to this philosophical conception and not to the person. Jesus is too great for this and too real. The writer knows him too well, and his devotion to him is too absolute, as the gospel itself will show. He can say everything he has to say about Jesus without so much as using the term, and the interest of the prologue for our present purpose is that it puts at the very outset, though in a form that has created some misapprehension, John's sense of the divine, eternal, and universal significance of Jesus. Now, at the risk of being tiresome, it may be said once more that he did not borrow this from the Logos. He borrowed the Logos because it lends itself to the convenient and intelligible expression of this independent Christian conviction. The value of the Logos doctrine for a Christian is that it can be used in this way, and if it ceased to be convenient or intelligible, as it was to Christians of Asia Minor when the gospel was published, its value would be gone.